Okay, I think it's time for us to get started. I'm procrastinating a minute because we have one panelist who told me she's en route and she'll be here in just a moment. But we'll go ahead and start introductions. One, even though I'm not smiling yet, I'm going to be smiling half the time. I am delighted for this panel. We have a very fine group of what I would consider diversity across the spectrum of the entertainment ecosystem. Now, what does that mean? You have content creators up here, you have platforms like Fullscreen up here, you have major broadcasters and digital platforms like Univision up here, represented up here. And then you have the ecosystem that makes it all run. You have a software company that specifically works with content creators and royalties and all the underlying things that form the back end. So I think that we have a really broad, and forgive me if I didn't say that right, but let me just say this. The business of entertainment is shifting rapidly, and these are the kind of professionals that you can get the good pulse on where the market's going and to find the opportunity that you're looking for regardless of what side of the business that you are either on or want to be on next. With all that said, that mouthful, my name is Jeffrey Thompson. I'm your moderator today. My expectation is that we'll go through some introductions. We'll probe on some of the different industry trends and what these fine people are doing in their space, and then we'll save some time for some questions for you. A brief background on me. I spent 11 years at the Walt Disney Company. I worked in digital streaming with ABC.com. Worked on the very first HD streaming platform when high-definition streaming really had just been invented, and most of these platforms didn't exist. I then went to launch Blu-ray disc, which was the last, what I think, physical format that any motion picture studio will ever see. And we called it back then the bridge to digital. What made it work for most of the studios, even now, is that Blu-ray disc represented a software approach to the business, and Blu-ray disc meant that all of the workflows from camera capture all the way through your post-production editing, it enabled digital. So all the digital back-end workflows change, and those costs that were invested in led to a whole lot of cost investment that allowed for a lot of digital content and professional content to be created for digital platforms. That's way too much, right? What I'm just saying is that led to 3 startups, Condé Nast Entertainment. Anybody seen The Scene? I was on the team with Dawn Ostroff that built that strategy that helped launch a 20 magazine company to go digital. And any magazine company knows how hard that is. And then I've been involved with 2 digital platforms, one called Shout Factory that we launched the James Brown channel, we launched the Richard Pryor channel, we launched Scream Factory Television, all on digital platforms represented by Fullscreen, Maker, and others that are up on this panel. So I'm going to stop there just to say, let's have a great engagement. These guys are ready to go, and so why don't we go ahead and start. By the way, this is long. I'm just my last procrastination. That's what this is. All right, so we're going to get going. So let's start with introductions. Jennifer from Univision. Why don't I have you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, what Univision's doing, and then I told you I was going to ask you something. Tell us about something that you guys are doing that you are commanding the space or can command the space that others may not be doing.
Yes. Hi, my name is Jen Perry. I head up the Univision Creator Network at the UCN, which is what we refer to our creator network as. We represent 200 plus of the top Hispanic influencers here in the US. There's 2 reasons why we launched this program. Number 1, it was for brand sales opportunities. We believe we have the best sales force in the country for Hispanic America, so it's been a really, really great experience bringing these influencers and connecting them with top brands like Coca-Cola, T-Mobile, among some of the best brands in the world. And then also for talent development. At Univision, what really sets us apart from maybe some of our competitors in the space is that we have access to television, radio. We're a national broadcaster. We also have access to local markets. So we've been able to incorporate our influencers in a lot of really meaningful ways across most of our platforms, including radio, live events, our award shows. And I think we've built a really, really great community around that.
Quick question. Everybody knows what a celebrity is. They know what talent is. What the heck is an influencer?
We were just talking about this a few minutes ago. I think there's a range, right? Sometimes I playfully refer to, hey, influencers are the new mom and pop shops, because everyone can really be an influencer, and the size of an influencer really ranges in terms of like what your influence is and how much you can command to work with a brand. But there are some influencers who I would say are legitimate household names and what I would refer to as a celebrity.
Fantastic. All right, I'm setting you guys up for questions and probe where you need help and where you need to grow. John, welcome from Fullscreen. I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Fullscreen or anything you have going that you think would be fine, and then I got to throw something at you. You're one of the companies that, your company now is Fullscreen, got acquired by AT&T. So now you have a big brother or sister, depending on how we define that. You are changing rapidly, but tell us about like what's moving in the space and maybe some bottlenecks that exist in the space that are holding it back.
Sure. There are daily bottlenecks, so I'll get into that. I'm John Holdridge. I am the Senior Vice President of Social Video Strategy at Fullscreen. I oversee our video group and our paid media group, and that's within our brand division of Fullscreen. So there's sort of three components of it. You might, sort of most commonly know us as a creator network, and we definitely got our roots on empowering creators and helping them build their business and their brands. And we're doing that, and my group is focusing on that with the brands themselves and the media companies today. One of the things that I'm really focused on right now that I think is interesting, that as we're all looking at it, is that platforms are sort of here to stay, right? And we realize that we're in a moment of time where we're now making content to monetize. Historically, they were making content to just market, to sort of get eyeballs on that. And I think that shifts the way we think about everything. And what's really interesting with that is that affects the creator, that affects the brand, that affects anyone who's really the audience who's coming to those platforms. And so I think for us, what the bottleneck that we're thinking about now is everyone thinks about the what's next, right? And you want to solve for that. But what we really need to do right now is to understand that we're in this interesting intersection where disruption is a very positive thing. The fact that we have audiences fragmented, the fact that we've got content everywhere, the fact that we are trying to find a way to connect with these fans, that's what keeps us going. That's what allows us to sort of invent and innovate on what could be new strategies to actually maybe remarket in a way where we can get them to come back to us, or we could potentially sort of integrate with what we want to do. And it really becomes now around focusing on the conversation and being part of that conversation. And so having the support of Otter, which was a joint venture between the Chernin Group and AT&T, back and support Fullscreen has been amazing. And we're really sort of out there bullishly thinking about entertainment and the experience that goes around that entertainment.
That's great. Before you get off of this, you mentioned monetization, and then you mentioned previously the metric was eyeballs or impressions.
For me,
What's different?
For me, it was historically when I looked at YouTube in the space, a lot of folks weren't thinking about making money yet, right? It was just sort of like, we know we need to be there, we want to get that content out there, and previously you had seen big media companies like the NBCs of the world or the A&Es, they were not monetizing, right? They were not seeing these platforms as a way in which there could potentially be an ROI business there. And when you go onto their channels now and anyone can look, they're monetizing and they're making money. And so they're starting to realize that audiences are there, right? That we're starting to see that pendulum shift come from TV and traditional into digital. And so to think about the fact that we live in a world where you want to have some sort of component of making money on this. I think social is very new on that, right? It's still sort of very much in the early phases, but I think we're all defining what does it mean to have success, to make money on these platforms, and what's that going to look like. And quite frankly, for any businesses, how do you build a business? What's your model look like on these social platforms? So I think that's really interesting, and that's a challenge and a bottleneck that we're always trying to push through and think about.
That's great. That's great. James, I'm going to you.
There we go.
All right. So an enabler that makes a whole lot of the secret sauce behind the scenes happen. Can you introduce your company, and why what I just said either makes sense or doesn't?
100%. Yeah, I'm James Creech, co-founder and CEO of Paladin. We build enterprise software for next generation media companies, much like the folks you see here up on the stage. So, we focus on creator management, royalty accounting and payments, and influencer and paid media campaigns. So how do we make those back office processes, work much more smoothly and have greater effectiveness? What we're focused on is looking at those evolving business models. How are these new media companies, and oftentimes the talent they represent, monetizing, whether that's ads, subscriptions, transactions, brand campaigns, and ingesting that data and making sure people are paid accurately and on time.
And people don't realize, and by the way, I'm going to just gloss this, but people don't realize how hard the back-end process is. You guys, how many of you are either content creators? So some content creators. How many of you distributors or working for distributors on the distribution side? How about agencies? Okay, one agent, that's perfect. What do the rest of you do again? That's a bad joke. All right, but here's where I'm going. You guys remember that Walt Disney Company got into a big lawsuit over Winnie the Pooh, right? Over royalties. It became a $100 million lawsuit because Winnie the Pooh, when it was created, there wasn't home entertainment at the time. There wasn't digital at the time. There wasn't packaged media. And all of these definitions had to be created. And then there was teams that had to go behind the scenes and manually calculate everything, not just royalty, but everything else around that. Digital has made it so much more challenging because now you're talking about artists that you're getting a quarter a cent per play or per view, or and the publisher tracking that and avoiding liabilities. And by the way, I know I'm under.
That's exactly right.
I'm cutting on one sliver, but
Yeah.
there's so much more. So if those of you who are invested in growing in this space, he's a great guy and platform to talk to because the business side of it is an important one to monetize. So, Sarah.
Yes,
All right, so we have new form.
very good.
And I messed up
Well
and said
done.
free form. We're talking about
All
new
right.
form. Tell us about new form, what you guys are doing, and why did those content creators come together to create a new form of content?
Great, I'd love to. My name is Sarah Malkin. I'm VP of Programming and Development at Newform. Newform is a digital entertainment studio. We were founded about 3 years ago by Ron Howard, Brian Grazer, other Hollywood luminaries, CAA, and Discovery to pioneer in short form premium content for this new crazy space we call the digital space. Since that time, we have launched 22 original series on every new distribution platform that has arisen, from Full Screen's SVOD service to Go90, which is Verizon's original content provider, to YouTube Red, to the CW's The Seed. We make great content, great stories for a new generation of viewers in new ways that they're consuming content. I forgot the next part of the question. Will you repeat it?
Hey, why did those guys come together,
Oh,
guys and gals,
yeah.
they're all
Yeah.
they're all in the regular film business. Why are they in digital?
Oh, sure. I think everyone, and we're seeing this, a lot of people have already echoed these themes, that there is a real convergence of traditional entertainment and digital entertainment right now. Everyone has been excited over the past, 10 years in the new democratization of content creation that has been enabled by a lot of the platforms that we're here to talk about. That there's no longer a need for a formal green light process by 7 different executives before anyone in this room can have an idea, make that idea, put it out to audience, and get a response on it right away. So these luminaries were as excited by it as I think all of us in this room are, and wanted to also participate in the new ways that this technology and this market allows us to tell stories. One of the things I'm really excited about Newform is that we really try to take our name seriously, and we're always looking for ways to make vertical content or text-based storytelling. Stories are our core, but the mediums, the messages, and how we tell those particular types of stories change as new emerging platforms launch every single day.
So you have 22 series in production?
We
Is that, what is that?
we have produced and distributed 22 series over the 3 years that we've been around, which is 3 times more than most of the digital studios that are our competitors. We went out of the gate really hard through the model that I think a lot of people in this room espouse, which is just do it, just make it. So we invested right away. Developed through doing, put a lot of content out there, got bites from financiers who were able to help make the entire series happen, and have created narrative, longer mid-form series through this process, anthology series through this process, and are in 2nd and 3rd seasons on several of our shows as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank
Thank
you. Get ready for questions, because I know a bunch of you are content creators, and you have to ask, like, whoa, why are they going in this digital space, and can you make money at it, and can you build to it? So I think the answer is already starting to be yes, but we'll figure it out. George Ozunian.
Great.
Did I say that right?
Perfect. Thank
But here,
you.
no, don't. You can't go yet, because he's got the best email. Anybody he's a YouTube celebrity, so get ready. Captain.maddox@gmail.com. Well, that is the best email. I asked you if I could say that before, but
Yeah.
Captain Maddox. Tell
Thank
us
you.
about that. All right, go on.
Yeah, so thank you, JT, for asking who the creators are in the audience. I'm glad to see there are a lot of creators here because I bring that perspective, I think, to this talk. I started my website in 1997, which is one of the oldest running websites still on the internet. It's older than YouTube. No, it's older than YouTube and Google, actually, obviously, because YouTube came after. So I wrote this piece back in 2002 called "I Am Better Than Your Kids" that went super viral. I got millions and millions of hits overnight. I graded children's artwork. And that led to a book deal, and then a second book deal, and a third, and my third book's coming out next week. I started a YouTube channel to kind of translate my audience that's traditionally web, and they came to my website for my writing originally. And I tried to create a video analog to the written form. So the very first video I launched on my channel was an analog to grading children's artwork, which is grading children singing. I wanted to take advantage of the medium, and I grew that YouTube channel fairly successfully. And then I started a podcast network, and I've created my own technology base for my podcast network, which is something that a lot of podcasts don't currently have, which is native voting on the website, which increases engagement, brings people there. And I've had to deal with the same thing that a lot of content creators have had to deal with today, which is finding new ways to monetize your content, especially with the quote adpocalypse that's on YouTube and all the other challenges that we've had to overcome that way.
That's great. So talk about for a minute YouTube celebrity, and then second to that, bear with me. I want to say half the companies that are up here launched their digital on the YouTube platform, right? Awesomeness TV was launched and monetized, Full Screen, Maker. And every studio, including Univision, has a YouTube strategy. So talk a little bit, and since the panel does say YouTube on it, can you talk a little bit about YouTube and what's going on over there with YouTube Celebrity or others?
Specifically with Celebrity, with regards to what about the YouTube Celebrity aspect?
These influencer networks
yes.
have been growing so rapidly.
Right.
And they're all talent-based. I worked at Disney 11 years, but I didn't become, a launcher of talent until I launched the James Brown channel, a tiny little channel on YouTube that Universal took an interest in because they had a movie coming out. Well, my get is you've empowered a whole lot of content creation and a whole lot of monetization on top of that platform. And of course, I have a Facebook question coming up, so answer this right, because I have another one coming from Facebook.
Right. So I'm friends with a lot of the larger YouTube celebrities as well, like PewDiePie and Ethan Klein from H3H3. These are huge channels, and they're basically household names for anyone who's a content creator on YouTube. Everybody knows who they are, but outside of YouTube, they don't. And that's a huge problem. I feel like there's a huge disconnect in Hollywood right now. They don't understand the power of these YouTube celebrities. They don't understand, you said you spoke to influencers. They're the real deals. There's people who call themselves influencers because they want to get freebies at different conventions and things like that. But the real influencers are actually that. They are influencers, and they are paid upwards of 10 to 50 grand for one Instagram post because it will drive sales. It will drive traffic to your website. And a lot of the challenges that influencers are facing today is the demonetization of YouTube videos, which I foresaw a while ago, especially because of the type of content I make. It's very acerbic, very controversial. It'll put you in a bad mood. People don't necessarily want to always monetize that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, why don't I cut the middleman and try to create a monetization strategy that basically sold my own product. People are coming to YouTube for you, the content creator, so why not give them more of what they're here for, which is more of you, and sell that to them. And I started creating my own 4-second pre-roll in front of my videos because I predicted that someday monetization might go away. And thankfully, when it did, I still had some form of revenue stream generated.
So Sarah next to you is with traditional filmmakers that have now gone to, they've been doing blockbusters, and I want to say Apollo 13 was one of my favorites, but they got into this space and they're in it to monetize, right? So what are these guys that, from your YouTube days and seeing YouTube celebrities that have grown up organically, what are these guys missing or not in moving to this space? And I'm going to let you, remember, my job is to start trouble. So I'm just,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that, can I jump in?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm jumping in. To be clear, I think, our founders were really excited about the creative promise of the space, and that's why they got invested. And now the people that are running the company and our investors from Discovery and ITV, and those of us who are, I come from Maker, a lot of us come from different backgrounds, both in traditional and digital, are excited by really the overall promise of being able to create content and get it directly to viewers more quickly. And I think that's why, and more directly, and have more immediate impact and communication with our audiences. And that is, I think, the success that YouTube absolutely, the promise that YouTube was built on and the success that it created was enabling so many people to have a platform who might not have had those eyeballs before, but now had a big C that is essentially a search engine where so many people are looking for great content and can find people that they respond to and want to watch. So really all the celebrities, influencers, people who are creating on YouTube and on other platforms like YouTube, like Facebook, are becoming programmers themselves and thinking through brand strategy, what content development and production looks like for them, and building really legitimate businesses as broadcasters through just new means of distribution. And for our founders, for our company, it was the overall exciting promise of what that allows in terms of freedom for new forms of storytelling.
No,
Money's important too, but the promise of creative, creative expression is really what the beginning was.
Are you seeing, the big studios would do their 360 strategy, right? You have their big movie, and then they're going to monetize that across the world, then they're going to bring it out on the paid TV windows and all the windows, and they're going to do merchandising and other things, and they would be looking for these franchises. But you needed a huge property, making it up, The Dark Knight, you need Batman, a big property to make that happen. Are you seeing the reverse happening in a big way now, where content's being created, it's being bubbling up? I know at Maker you see some YouTube stars. I say Maker because there's some PewDiePie was one I'm thinking about, but who basically and built up from there. Are you seeing that with franchises? Or is that your goal at Newform, to build these little small stories and then build them up till they go across platforms, or you're doing a blockbuster movie around it?
I think we're always excited when there are extensions of a show that reach beyond, one piece. Our show, Mr. Student Body President, which now has multiple seasons on Go90, has, I think a longevity and an interest beyond the show itself. But, there is, I think, besides the money being greater still in the traditional space, for many people who are in the room and many people who started in their business on digital, that sort of leap to different platforms is really not the goal. The goal is connection to the viewers that are meaningful to the content, and of course, what it means to survive means some sort of monetization that allows the continuation of that content. But I think there's so many different ways that people see success, and it isn't necessarily around a big acquisition and strategy for Maker with Disney or a big, huge blockbuster. Of course, that if that means more people are responding to the content, that's what's exciting.
That's great.
Yeah, I think what's fundamentally changed is that the economics have evolved, right? If you think about the big studios, they're not in the business of making content so much anymore. They're in the business of making content to promote a theme park business and to sell more Halloween costumes, sweatshirts, and everything else. So when you think about consumer products being the single biggest revenue driver for most of the large studios, they're continuing to swim upstream and focus on those big franchises, which is why we have sequelitis. But it creates this huge hole, this opportunity now for digital content to monetize in different ways and to reach an audience. And absolutely, the franchises of the future will be built first in digital, because it takes forever to incubate, develop a new franchise property in the traditional model. It takes years of time, millions of dollars, whereas with real-time testing on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, you can identify influence and reach an audience immediately.
I'm telling you, segue perfectly, because I'm going to ask you another question about the back end of this. But we talk about the fact that content and the fact that, it's a fair discussion, and we always talk about the diversity of content, right? Some would argue that because you have the democratization or the lower cost of content, the risk is lower. Therefore, stories that are more niche stories can be told that the big studios could never tell. That is something that, I think about Issa Rae, who's now got her HBO special. I was Insecure. I think it started as another, and I remember I was looking at her, she had a YouTube channel.
Yeah,
And her YouTube
Awkward Black
channel.
Girl. Yeah.
Awkward Black Girl. And I remember on her YouTube channel that she was asking for money after every, please send money on my GoFundMe page. And now she's got an HBO, a special, and I think she's on season 2 or 3 now, just signed. And so that's just one example. So I think you're absolutely right. But let's talk about something else. Talk about the fact that we've always judged the success of content by either box office, or we judged it by Nielsen, we judged it by broadcast ratings. Digital opens up a whole nother ability to track audiences. Can you talk a little bit about that, and what are the smart players doing to make that a strategic advantage? This is for like all you guys. I know everyone's doing some level of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll kick things off, but Jen and John are probably much more qualified to speak about this than me. I come from an ad tech background, and so hearing the names Nielsen and ComScore, which are the lies we all agreed to believe one day, we measure things in an entirely different way in digital. And so whereas in traditional media, the benchmark was, impressions and how often someone sees that opportunity, whereas in digital, we have much more access to analytics, right? We can think about things like engagement rates and unique viewership, and really drill down to identify those audience segments that are responding to your content and thus taking an action to purchase or engage further with the brand. So, we're seeing a whole host of new measurement companies pop up. We're seeing individual players who are producing content think about how are we ensuring a great experience both for creators that we work with and for advertisers.
Yeah, and I think to build on top of that, one of the things that I always say when I work with our content teams is, data should inform, right? Like there's still a creative touch that I think really makes something special or stand out. So yes, it's important to think about what is trending and what is the data informing us to think about, and is there a different thing I should be approaching when I am building this concept. But I think there is still room for creativity, and there should be. I think when we're looking at the success of YouTubers and influencers in general, it's people who have had a very strong point of view or who are extremely creative and have developed characters that we really connect with. And a lot of the time it started with just an idea, not because data informed. Now they've been able to build and maybe have longevity because they've used data to continue to inform their strategy. But I always say that data should inform, but not always be the only thing that you look at when you're considering your strategy.
Yeah, it's the blend of art and science. And I think for so many now, they're realizing that because we live in a digital world, there's real-time feedback. And so I think when you look at a traditional model, right, when you would go to television, you more or less have season 1 shot and in the can, and it's done. When you're thinking about sort of iterating on what you're doing within digital in these platforms, you're getting that feedback, you're getting that response, and you're able to sort of close that loop in terms of, maybe episode 1 looks different from episode 2, and even with some very popular creators, you're finding them figure out their own flow and their own formats, and they're not consistent throughout their life cycle. They're trying to sort of implement new things, and obviously they're going to go to sort of what is their sweet spot and what their audience wants. But the ability to test, learn, and test again, I think, is what is so valuable now, and that integrates data, that integrates sort of the metrics of it, and that integrates the creativity as well, where you're not only getting feedback, where you can start to say, if you're an entertainment company and you're thinking about one of your franchises, is there a subplot line within a smaller character that we didn't think to look at, and should we do something and build an audience around that?
Yeah, and I think another question that I always ask myself is about what is quality in this space. I think that's something that in digital we're always questioning because, as someone who works, within this sort of melded world of traditional with, awesome budgets and digital with shoestring budgets, you really look at the digital opportunity and you say you cannot use the same strategy that you use for television or film production for digital. It just does not make sense. I've spoken with a lot of people who come from a traditional background and say, hey, I spent all this money, I made this really awesome production and I got like 3 views. And the question is, well, that doesn't always translate to quality on the space. One of the first clients I worked with was a girl who was go-go dancing at the time. Her name was Jenna Marbles. You may have heard of her. And she got her millions of fans in the beginning with just her MacBook Pro. And that was it. There was I think I finally got her to get like a light. But it was all from the home, being super creative and just thinking about, hey, what do girls, connect with? Like, hey, everyone has like this weird story about a guy trying to pick up with them on the club, and she just had her point of view about it. But again, I would say there's a ton of quality, into what she produced, but there was no fancy cameras, there was no budget. It was just a great idea, great point of view, and she was willing to do the work of editing it herself. So that's something else to think about when you're thinking about your strategy is, what does the budget look like, and does it make sense?
It's funny because people that grow up on digital and grow up on these social platforms, they typically have a different kind of realness than a traditional celebrity. Like when I'm thinking about social posting and I'm thinking about how they engage, they're not behind publicity walls and the messaging handlers and that kind of thing. And is it that authenticity that you're talking about the secret sauce? Is it the authenticity? I mean, what is it that's different? And by the way, Sarah, George, you're about ready to go. We haven't talked about your book yet, but I will. But Sarah, the reason I'm throwing it your way, you're kind of just such a blend because you're telling stories, but your foundation is different. Yeah. And what is this secret sauce stuff?
It's a great question. I think there is no doubt that the immediate, fresh appeal of people without filter, speaking truthfully about what is important to them is what connected originally, whenever it was, the 10 years plus, when all these platforms were born, and people like Jenna, who, as you said before, would never have seen, a television show from a traditional broadcaster who wouldn't have been able to understand what that mass appeal would be, could find I don't even want to call it a niche audience, just an audience that wasn't being considered by greenlighters as the important audience to target. And that was that authenticity that connected so many people to viewers who were hungry for it. I think what we found is, whether as a result of or in conjunction with that love of authenticity and that real bullshit detector that audience had early on for the people speaking to them in their living room, that certainly has created an entire generation of viewers and consumers who have no tolerance to feeling that they're being pandered to or packaged to or sold to in an obvious way, in a trying to be pretend way. They're okay to be sold to in a direct way, but they're really, really aware when they're being sold to in a way that's trying to win one over on them. So it does affect the way that we tell stories. We try to be really direct and on the level with our audience, and we create stories that we feel are from truly unique points of view that are not always the ones that are represented in our mainstream media, voices that we feel like with our nurturing, with our support, we'll be able to find an audience like Jenna did, but may not have been greenlit by whomever at whatever big fancy place. And we take that very seriously, and I think that is why our content, while it still has craft and still has a care for some traditional metrics like arcs and conflict and those things that we went to drama school for and writing school for, we really keep that direct, authentic feeling, and I think that's very important.
So the guy who's been around since '97 doing blogs, what would you say different? And by the way, I mentioned his book because he has the coolest title in his book. What's the title of your book?
You tell the title.
You want me to say it?
You're on digital.
Okay.
It's very authentic.
Yeah, it's called Fuck Whales. It's the new one. It's the new one coming out.
Comes out next week, right?
Yeah, it comes out next week. I suggest you don't read it. It'll just put you in a bad mood. But the thing about what you spoke to is the authenticity. You go to my website. It was created in 1997, and it looks like it was created in 1997. Still, today, 20 years. I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary last month, and it still looks like an old GeoCities website. And people tell me all the time, like, Maddox, why don't you upgrade your website? Why don't you upgrade the design, make it look nicer? And I thought about that. That's a question I've been asked for years, literally 2 decades now. And the reason is because the purpose of my website is to deliver content to the viewer. They come to my website, they click on an article, and they read, and that's how they consume the content. I can't think of a way to improve that design. I can't think of a way. I could add all sorts of different, CSS and fades and round corners and things like that. But at the end of the day, that's not why people are coming to consume my content. They're coming because they want to hear my voice. And that's exactly what I'm delivering to them. I mean, if you look at Google as a template, Google really hasn't changed their front page design much in over 20 years now. It's pretty much the same thing. Craigslist is another great example. There's a lot of companies throw a lot of money towards design and production, especially on YouTube. And I think that's why it doesn't translate. It doesn't translate when they try to take a YouTube star and put them into a traditional Hollywood TV show. I think, who was it? Hannah Hart? I think they tried to give her a show that was...
Grace Helbig.
Oh, Grace Helbig, that's right. Grace Helbig. Yeah, they tried to groom her to be the next Chelsea, but the audience didn't translate from YouTube. And I think part of the reason is because there is a sense of accessibility when you have a creator putting something out there that looks kind of crappy. And that's all of my content. All of it looks kind of crappy. And I remember when I first started recording videos and things at the YouTube space, they're great down there. The production staff is amazing. They teamed me up with a designer, and they said, we're going to design a new logo for your channel. And this designer created this logo that looked amazing. It was immaculate. And I said, no, I can't use this. It's just too perfect. It feels like a company is behind it and not me as an individual, because everything I do is hands-on, everything I make is hands-on, and it makes the audience feel like they do have a conduit directly to the creator, which is important in this day and age, I think.
I really think that is the other piece, right? In addition to the authenticity, it's the proximity, right? So in traditional media, it's a one-way kind of push monologue, whereas now in digital platforms, we have this two-way communication. It's really a dialogue for the first time, whether it's live streaming or the way to engage with content on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram through comments, sharing. That's what's transformed the media and entertainment viewing experience.
Anybody else want to answer that? Because I got a good one for you guys. So you guys, anybody that's in digital has already moved and is already looking at what's next. What is next? Like what these guys, like Snapchat. We all miss Snapchat. Did anyone get Snapchat early on? Like, yeah, my daughter. But meaning, Sony Pictures, Michael Linton just left Sony Pictures because of Snapchat, because he was president of Sony Pictures. My point is that like knowing what's next matters. What's next? Put your crystal balls on for a minute. What should these people be looking at, either creative-wise, next iteration of content-wise, John, or others? Like, what should we be concentrating on to make that next either creative expression or money?
I mean, I think from my point of view, I'm obviously looking at what's happened with the MCN space in particular. I think there's a little bit of sense of the goals that maybe existed 5 or 6 years ago for a lot of these MCNs were to be acquired, right, into maybe somebody like Univision. So the goal to me, it always seemed was scale at any expense, at anyone's expense. Doesn't matter if we need you because we need a bajillion views. I think that's changed. I think now, I called it, that stupid money time is sort of gone, and now people have to really look at like what is the business opportunity and what is sustainable. And so I think there is going to be a little bit of a consolidation period. We've already seen it with Maker Studios being absorbed fully into Disney, and they let go of most of their staff. They let go of most of their influencers. I think at one point they had maybe like almost 100,000 influencers. I mean,
are they optimized, or what's the deal? Are they
I can't really speak for what's happening in there, right? Because I'm not in there, but I know now they probably cut down to maybe about 1,000 influencers, or maybe 2,000. But again, a fraction of where they were at before. And I think I get it. When we built Univision, we had a very clear perspective of, hey, if we can't truly be partners with these people, we're not going to bring them in. So we've always stayed very niche because number one, you can truly serve that community that you're building. And we're Univision, we're already an established company, so we didn't need to do that. But I think you're going to see a little bit of a consolidation period where, scale. I think there's still groups out there that say, hey, we're the biggest and most massive, and this is the message they send to influencers. And I always question, what does that mean? Like, if you're the most massive, you're going to be one of a million. Like, I want to be part of something where I'm not one of a million, where I'm maybe one of a couple hundred, because that's going to sort of maybe indicate the quality of service you get. So, again, this is a little bit from our business perspective, but, and as maybe creators, if you're looking to partner with someone, think about who can truly service you. The biggest is not always the best, especially if you want time and attention and services. You will really want to look at someone who really understands maybe your point of view and can provide you with some guidance, and can maybe give you a little bit more of that one-on-one attention potentially.
John, Senior Vice President of Social Strategy. Like, okay.
Got to live up to
wisdom,
that, I
please.
guess.
I know, right? That's your title, man.
So it's interesting. I think the reality of it is that most people don't really feel totally comfortable to say what's next because it keeps changing so fast. And I think that's what makes it really interesting for everyone is that we're sort of figuring out what's going to happen in real time ourselves. And you're trying to use your best judgment now to really determine what that means to make a living there, to build a business there, to connect with audience there. I'd say that we talk a lot about the business model changing and monetization. I think that has a long way to go. I think we've clearly realized that making money on platforms is tough, right? Facebook is just turning on monetization and it's proving to be really challenging. And I think there's a lot more that's going to sort of need to go into that to determine, what does that mean? What does that mean for the individual, for the brand, for the media company? And then how does that change them operating in terms of how much staff they have, how much content they're making? There was any CMO would traditionally look at saying, if I spend X, I know I'll get Y. And that doesn't really exist within social, right? We sort of don't have that yet. And so I think the business model changes, and I think the storytelling changes. I think that's what's going to happen. I think we're seeing it now. All of us in what's happening in the current events of the world is that we're becoming more and more connected to wanting to understand what's happening out there. And we're wanting to understand how others feel and communicate a voice about that and share some emotion, be it positive or negative or neutral or whatever it may be. And I think that's where storytelling becomes increasingly more important. I think when we think about large companies, be it a traditional entertainment company or a brand, they're thinking about the fact that they can't just hawk products anymore. It's becoming about being part of that conversation. How does it feel integrated and not interruptive? And as any creator, as any influencer thinks about continuing to sort of build their life on social, let others into it, it becomes more and more about, not only is it just saying, oh, you got to be genuine, but it becomes being, I'd say, very, very humble and very open. And I think humility is an amazing thing. And I think the more companies that embrace the fact that the change is positive, but it's scary, that's where it's all going. And I think we're sort of trying to figure that out and together, but I think we have a lot more changes that are going to happen. Everyone said that platforms were going to be new platforms are going to be happening every single year. I haven't seen that happen actually as much. If anything, I start to see people sort of shy away from certain ones, and others start to really double down on their growth. So I think it's really interesting, and I think where the predictions from 2-3 years ago, we're actually starting to see some of those happen and some of those not happen. And so now it becomes a little bit of sort of being okay with the unknown. And that is a sort of a wishy-washy answer, but I think that's truly the way in which to embrace this, is to be head-on with it and realize that you're going to fail as much as you're going to succeed right now.
Yeah, and it's funny because you're seeing, I want to continue this, by the way, because we haven't, but just like when you were saying that, there have been 3 announcements in the last week. Amazon might be trying to compete against YouTube. And, there's just all these announcements, and some of them will be real. What's Apple going to do? Because they've been moving around and monetizing, but, they haven't been at the forefront on some things as we move forward, right? And some of the UGC and other things. Go ahead, James. I know I'm cutting. Go.
Yeah, so I echo much of what John said, and I think the thing that is clear is that we're still in early innings, right? If you look at the historical evolution of media formats, take radio in the 1920s or cable broadcast television in the 1960s and their evolution, these arcs take decades, right? And we're seeing that accelerated dramatically in digital video, but where you start with something that begins as general entertainment, news, programming, then you drill down into content verticals, and that's why we have serving Spanish language, U.S. Hispanic audiences. We have women's lifestyle, sports, etc. Then we're drilling down into the superfan communities that George and Sarah highlighted, which is the fact that we're getting even more granular and trying to super serve those audience communities. So whether it's digital publishers, whether it's influencer marketing agencies, talent management companies, MCNs, and the different forms that they've taken shape, these next generation media companies are going to identify and serve those audiences in many ways.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sarah and George?
Yeah, I think a few people have talked about what's been happening around consolidation of services. I think we're really seeing a trend clearly towards the Facebooks, YouTubes, and Snapchats, which may have started with people making their own content on them being social engagement platforms to wanting to own the entire experience. Verizon as well, wanting to own the content experience in addition to being a distribution platform, really be behind content in a bigger way. And I think we'll see our big companies continuing to lean into that. And some of the smaller distributors, I think I would argue there have been a lot of platforms that have launched, and a lot of them have already fallen because there is not an endless sea of attention for everybody to watch every single thing on every single platform. And what we see now is creating content is easier than ever, but getting people to watch it is harder than ever. And so it continues to be a battle for attention is the big thing we're going to see. That said, I feel like what's next is what will always be true, which is great content is going to always be important. And no matter what ways in which we watch it, and no matter how, and no matter what new tools and bells and whistles, the importance of something of quality, however quality is defined, finding its audience, something that speaks to people, finding whom it speaks to. I think that will always be what really cuts through, even in a very noisy landscape.
With regards to what's next, culturally speaking, I think two things. I have two predictions. First is sincerity. I feel like we are in a post-sarcastic society. Coming from me, I know. But I think sincerity is the next wave where the pendulum's going to swing. We are in just a crazy news cycle where every week I feel like there's a month's worth of headlines every week coming out. And I think that people are exhausted, and what's speaking to them is sincerity. People can sniff out bullshit. That's why the traditional model of, hey, here's my paper towel, can you sell it on your YouTube channel? No, I can't. And that's not going to speak to my audience. That's not how I do it. That's not if somebody had a really hip brand and they were trying to hawk Downy paper towels, it would just seem kind of weird and out of place. That's not the way. That's not the venue to do that. The second thing with regards to what's coming next, now I'm totally blanking on it. Sincerity and. Here's the other one. Okay, so I created a podcast network. It's called madcastmedia.com, and on it, between all the shows on the network, there's a reach of about 60 to 75,000 audience, which doesn't sound like a lot compared to YouTube numbers, but in the podcast world, that's huge. It's in the top 5% of all podcasts. For comparison, on monetization, if you monetize a video on YouTube, traditionally you would get anywhere from $1.50 to $3.50 CPM. In the podcast realm, it's much higher. It's about $43 CPM. And the reason is because podcast downloads, even though you don't get as many, they are much more valuable because the audience is much more engaged. But a lot of times I'll do workshops and talks and things like that, and people will come up to me and they'll say, hey, Maddox, how do I get my podcast to get a bigger audience? And it's like you said, it's really difficult to get people to engage in your content. Because when you send somebody, when's the last time anyone sent anyone something that was longer than an hour or 20, even 10 minutes to share online? It just doesn't happen. We don't share podcasts. We don't share long-form content anymore. One of the only successful long-form content videos I can think of in recent times was the Coney 2012 video, which was over 20, 30 minutes and went super viral. But that's so rare for a video to do that. So what you have to do, this is the trend, because of Snapchat, because of Instagram, and because of Vine, and the way that people consume short-form content, what I'm seeing now, the things that are becoming successful on YouTube, is content that mimics that, even though it's longer form. So there's a guy named Brandon Rogers who has an incredible channel where he has this frenetic, fast-paced, high-energy direction style, which feels like you're watching a series of vignettes of 6-second funny clips. And I think that's the direction that people are going now. You have to engage with the audience almost 6 to 10 seconds at a time, even during long-form content.
And I think to add on that, I think it's also fascinating to see what's going to happen with branded content, or just pre-roll, mid-roll, whatever we want to call it. It's getting shorter. So, and the attention spans are getting shorter. So I'm curious to see where that goes, because I think YouTube's changing its policy. There's some changes in terms of pre-roll. So I think again, pre-roll is getting shorter, and branded content, good, authentic, sincere branded content, I think is going to become a lot more popular. So I think.
Does everyone know what branded content is? Anyone not? It's okay if you don't. All right, good. All right, well, just give the 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, I think branded content is essentially when, in the influencer world or in the digital space, it's when you feature a product or you talk about a product or a brand, and usually you're paid or sponsored to do so. And obviously, this is not new or special to digital. This has happened traditionally in TV. I think in the beginning of television, that's all that existed was actually product placement. You would have somebody who was sitting there holding a can of beans or whatever. So it hasn't really changed. You also see it in the movies. If you see like somebody driving a certain type of car, happens a lot like in James Bond. That's product placement, and it's paid for.
Gotcha. And it's changing drastically. All right, so we're going to get to questions in a couple of minutes, so get ready now because we're going to do rapid fire. But I will be, this is going to be the last one I'm going to ask before we go to questions, but it's a big one because of all of the news stories about fake news, and we're not going politics here. What we're going is, because of digital, you can hyper target a particular audience, right? And that means that now I can serve an audience what they want and over-deliver on that. Now that said, the reason I'm going here is Facebook has now started getting into videos. And now, aside from them being huge in news, I came out of ABC, guys. ABC News, like Facebook News, are you kidding me? But the fact is, more people are getting their news on Facebook. If you look it up, huge women are getting more Facebook news than any other source at this point. Somebody check me on that. It's real. Hurricanes, everything. So where I'm going, that's a huge shift. But talk about content. Are you guys doing deals with Facebook?
Yeah, we actually.
Should we be?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone agrees Facebook is a huge opportunity. There's a huge, massive audience there. So if you're a content creator or a publisher, you definitely have to, I don't even say want to, you have to be on Facebook. Again, I think what people have learned in the past, over the past 10 years as the space has evolved is you have to go where the audience is. So whether that's, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, wherever, you have to be there because your brand has to be everywhere. But we just launched, Facebook just launched a pilot program. There's a lot of changes that are happening on the platform. It's all evolving. It's happening in real time. I can't even really speak to what all of those changes are. But there does seem to be a shift in focusing on video, and I don't think that's a surprise if we look at how people consume content or information. People are becoming more video focused. So even when you're looking for information on maybe what you would have looked for in an encyclopedia 20 years ago or on a blog 10 years ago, you're now looking for a video on YouTube or other places to kind of walk you through that information. So there's no surprise that is happening, but we're part of the pilot program. So 5 of our influencers now have original shows that are a part of the Facebook.
All right, so you
Watch
said all
program.
that, now you say that boom,
Yes.
5 of your influencers now
Yes.
have shows on Facebook?
Yes, original shows. So again, I think it's a very good sign that Facebook is investing in video.
Interesting.
So I think when I'm always looking at where influencers or new influencers can potentially build themselves, always go to the platforms that are investing in building new properties. Because, YouTube, for example, a lot of established players on that space, right? This new pilot program that Facebook is doing is still very new. So if you're not an established influencer, that might be a place you would want to target.
That's great. John, are you doing anything? And Sarah, I'm thinking about all you guys, James.
Yeah, we definitely are, and I think Facebook is incredibly interesting, and it's from a video standpoint, it's like you need to be there. I think Facebook has a lot of operational challenges they have to work out, quite frankly, because when you think of YouTube, it was created to go and search and consume videos. Facebook was there to sort of discover something in front of you while you're sort of searching through additional information at that time. The search feature and functionality from an operational standpoint is not quite where it needs to be. Most of the times we're watching Facebook in an environment where we can't have sound on, and so consuming a video in that experience, even though there's closed captioning now and everything, I think it's still got a little bit of a ways to go. But we're super interested in it, and we know you need to be there, and we're very interested to see what that that model is going to look like in terms of what kind of content you should put there, what that content should look like, how they're going to deal with the piracy of the fact that it's very easy to just sort of rip and upload content right now that is not your own. And that's going to be, I think, a big, tall order for a lot of folks to really get behind Facebook and believe in it. YouTube early on realized that they had to get ahead of that. And we're still policing that issue today. So I think Facebook has a little bit of they shifted and they pivoted, right? Zuckerberg said that, like he realized that like video was everything, and they went from sort of a connect with your friends and share information to we want this to be a place where you're consuming video first. And so I think we're going to see that start to kind of morph into potentially a lot of platform changes and developments over the next few years, I believe.
Yeah. It's exactly right. The experience of consuming video on Facebook, say, compared to YouTube, is night and day, right? It's social discovery in a news feed versus actively searching something out or having it shared with you and choosing to watch that, right? So click to play versus autoplay video, sound on versus muted environment, and the monetization challenges that we've seen so far on Facebook, right? YouTube has had massive scale and a bit of a supply and demand issue for years. That's why the CPM rates are so low and the fill rates are low. Facebook, we're seeing that at an even heightened level, right? That their CPMs are even lower than YouTube so far. It's promising for creators as an opportunity for ad monetization, but also for branded content. And the Facebook Media Solutions team and the Facebook Video Monetization team, both of which we work very closely with, are thinking about how do we bring more premium branded content dollars onto the platform. How do we ensure FTC compliance, which is an important watchword in the influencer community these days. And the other piece of it is now that Facebook and Instagram are starting to be a lot more closely aligned in the family, and we see the fact that we can share Instagram stories on Facebook stories now, that's driving more power. And I would actually argue that Instagram today is the faster and more promising player to watch from a video standpoint. The branded content dollars are already there. People are going to spend over $570 million just this year on influencer campaigns on Instagram, right? And as we're starting to see more brands and more content creators embrace that platform for things beyond the traditional fashion, beauty, or photography culture, which kind of got started, there's enormous potential for Instagram. So that's where we're betting big.
Great insight. Sarah, anything you want to add to that?
Just that I want to make sure there's a distinction between creators and publishers who have channels on Facebook and creating video as part of their feed and part of their programming on those channels, which is certainly something that Facebook over the last maybe year and some change has been really asking creators to do more with and prioritizing through the algorithm those videos that people are making on their own and getting them out to people more. And I think that's where a lot of the branded content opportunities come, and hopefully future monetization opportunities on those individual channels. And that's been very interesting. But really in this last month, I think when I was speaking to around the consolidation and the owning of the experience, Facebook has actually come out as well as a real broadcaster, a network, and said we are going to consolidate original, premium, meaning highly funded, whatever premium means, agree that it is always a fluid term, but funded original content and try to compete with Netflix, with Hulu, and with other premium, content providers under the Watch banner. And that's really only a month old. It's very exciting. It's very interesting. I think we all have a lot to wait and see around what will do well. They have some programs there that just feel like they could be TV, but on Facebook. They have other and of course this is what's more interesting to me, programmed and thought through in a formatting sense for the Facebook experience series. And it's going to be really interesting to see which of those receive more attention, and if they're able to fulfill their goal of being more than a social platform and really an entertainment platform in the biggest sense. And I think with money and smart minds, problems to overcome, but it will definitely be a very interesting thing to watch, and certainly an opportunity my company's taking very seriously.
It's great to hear it. George?
I don't trust Facebook. I don't trust it for the same reason I don't trust YouTube, and it's not a knock against either of these companies. It's because of the way that they serve content algorithmically. I have a total social reach on Facebook of about 250,000 and about 300,000 on YouTube. So people try to think that there should be like a one-to-one correlation between subscribers and views. That's just not the case. And if you think about the challenge from the perspective of Facebook, you totally understand it, because on average, I think I read something like people like, about 50 to 60 pages, different bands, different movies, different brands, and all of those people are trying to reach you. They're all trying to contact you. They're all trying to sell you something. So if Facebook just allowed free reign for all of these brands, your feed would be completely overwhelmed with brands selling you stuff. So I understand the need for an algorithmic solution to this. However, because of the algorithm, because I can't predict and rely on that algorithm, I have found a way to drive traffic to my videos, including Facebook and YouTube, that consistently outperforms much larger channels. For example, my YouTube channel only has about 300,000 subscribers. However, my videos consistently outperform channels that have 5 to 10 million. And the reason is because I create content that I'm driving partially from my old school website, which people forget, but that's a really important component. Don't forget the old school websites. It's still getting millions of views every day. So if I'm driving traffic to my YouTube channel, I have circumvented Facebook and YouTube to reach my audience. I have a one-to-one correlation to my audience. Mailing lists also. It seems like such an old school dinosaur technology, but it is the #1 driver of sales, clicks, traffic. It's something that people kind of have taken for granted. And in terms of how content has changed on Facebook, Facebook has influenced the type of videos we're seeing today in that I'll go to like a Washington Post and I'll click on a news article and I get so angry that there's no sound design. And I don't know why that is, but I hear that stock music playing. I'm like, oh, this is a Facebook video. I keep forgetting because I've turned off auto playing videos on Facebook, probably to my detriment. But but that's something I feel like has shifted with Facebook. If you're a content creator, you have to find a different way to engage with your audience and connect with them. Because if you cannot rely on an algorithm to do a good job for you, maybe it will, maybe it won't, but you can't get consistent results if they keep changing it without telling you what it's doing.
This is a great discussion, by the way. So now we'd like to open it up to you guys. Are there any questions that you guys might have that we want to get deeper on? Go ahead.
Sarah, when you, for the last 3 years, your short form, what were your average budgets per show?
There's a really wide range for us of budget, so it's not something that I can answer easily because each distributor has a different length and order in terms of, are we making 5-minute episodes, different length and different budget requirement than, 30 minutes. So there really is a very, very wide range, and I can't get more specific than that, unfortunately.
$10 up to
Hopefully more than $10, but we'll take what we can get. Up to 6 to 7 figures. Really that range in there for per episode or per order is what we're looking at. 6 to 7 figures per order. Yeah. No, I think constraint breeds creativity frequently. So we look. I forget who said this, but somebody very wisely said. That sometimes looking at the limitations of the budget and taking that as a way to get even more inventive about what you're making is a way to have even more impact in the space. But every distributor has their own amount that they're ready to spend, and our budgets are a big range because of it. We like to feel we can create to whatever the specs are that we're being asked to. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
And growing. They have to grow now.
Yeah.
More questions? Go right here, and then I'll go to you in the pink. Go right here.
Yeah, I have a question. Joyce addressed this for his particular blog and his YouTube, but how do each of you, it's great you're producing all this stuff, but how do you drive people there to watch?
A question for me? Or the rest? Yeah, I already kind of spoke to that, yes.
So I'd like to hear the other.
I can speak to some of that. I actually thought it was interesting as you kind of talk, the algorithm is it's bad, it's scary, right? It actually can be optimized. And part of what my background specifically is figuring out how to sort of back into what that is and realize that you can actually get your content seen and surfaced. It is challenging, but there is definitely abilities to figure out what the algorithm is doing and either go against it or go with it to get your content seen. Optimization can be such things such as figuring out through data, insights, analytics in terms of time of day, what people are searching, what your competitors are doing, how your metadata is doing, and you can start to see lift in performance. Typically, a optimized channel can have anywhere between a 15 to 35% increase just by that alone, and that's simply just following best practices. that can be seen across the board on a channel with 10,000 subscribers or a channel with 1 million subscribers. Further down that, and to get deeper in that rabbit hole, you can start to A/B test content, you can start to A/B test thumbnails, you can start to really get creative in terms of what's working and what's not working on these platforms. But I'd say that, we are definitely chasing, right? A lot of times we are reactive and sometimes not as proactive as we'd like. But there are ways in which you can start to figure out how to get deeper engagement and deeper interaction to get that content seen. And that's something in which, from services that you can provide, you can do that. There are companies where they are focusing specifically on trying to get content surfaced and seen in an organic way. Obviously, you can put money against it, but that's not always, the right play. It's a nice balance of organic and paid a lot of times.
In the pink, yes.
Hey, thanks. It's a great discussion. Thank you. I'm just wondering in this space, in this whole vast space, what are you seeing as it changes in terms of multi-generational contact? Are there influencers who are over 50 yet? Is there programming for people who are over 50 yet? How are you monetizing that content if there isn't any?
I think it's really underserved. There's enormous opportunity, for creating digital content, short-form content for older audiences. There have been players that have taken a stab at it. The couple examples that come to mind are like Channel Mum, which is based in London, or you've got Awesomeness TV. They launched Awestruck, which is focused on content for millennial moms, recognizing that some of their younger audiences were aging out of the preteen, tween content that Awesomeness TV was so known for. There are some digital publishers that are really going after that. The Young Turks Network just raised a chunk of cash, and they're taking on journalism as we know it, and for the better. There's a big need, and I think they distribute a lot of content both on YouTube and Facebook, and that's reaching kind of an older audience as well.
Yeah, and I think there's this preconceived notion that influencers are these tween 12-year-old kids who are, Nickelodeon age, and that's actually not true. I do think that's where maybe that's where the sort of sweet spot is, and that's where you get the highest level engagement. You get the crazy fangirls, but there is other generations and other demos that definitely exist. One of our fastest growing influencers most recently was somebody who's actually, I don't want to say her age, but she was not a teen and she was not a millennial, and she's actually an immigration attorney. And with a lot of sort of the questions and things that are happening in the world right now, there was a spike, an increase in search for this type of content. So this was a great moment for her because she had the knowledge. She's built credibility already within that space as somebody who has a law degree, is probably can relate to this demo. I think there is this preconceived notion that there's everyone's young, but there are influencers who actually are, 35 plus. They exist, and hopefully that'll keep growing. I think when we look at the Facebook audience, for example, it is actually a little bit of an older audience when you look at Snapchat or Instagram or even YouTube. So I think there's a huge opportunity specifically around Facebook to get that demo.
I think there had been such a focus, and I think we joke for the last 10 years we've been talking about the same age range. Well, clearly people have grown beyond that age range, but I think that focus was there initially because there was this huge concern that the 18 to 34-year-olds are not watching television. People above 34, you kind of can count on to watch television, so people don't need to panic as much about how they're going to reach them. But certainly, I think that's where because I've certainly noticed it too and feel it is an underserved and, kind of backwards way to be thinking always about youth, when there's so many people on the internet. It's not just this age range, but I think that's where that focus initiated. But certainly now we're in a changing time, and Facebook has a much wider range, and everybody's watching content online. So I think there is an opportunity for somebody who really focused content on a different demo now that we are seeing just such a blend in all areas.
The key is to not start your sentence with the World Wide Web. That's a bad joke. All right. No, that wasn't for you. Yeah, but for those of us that might be older, go right ahead.
Touch base on what you guys were saying. What would you suggest? Because I'm in that range of creating content for older generation. What kind of suggestions would you give to really attract an older demographic to my channels?
I think it goes back to optimization. Another thing we always, encourage people to do is collaborate with other people. Look for other influencers who maybe you connect with and you have similar type of content that you want to start building. Now, when you're doing that, think about who you can approach maybe when you're just starting. Probably don't reach out to like a PewDiePie level person because he's like so massive that he might not be able to do it. But hey, I mean, as an example, my dog has a channel. It's like a little side project.
You gotta plug it. What's it called?
Just because I just wanted to test. I'm like, what is it really like to build something from nothing? And it's hard. But
What's the name of the channel?
Char the dog. Like and subscribe, please, on YouTube. But I actually found other dog channels, and I would go and engage on those dog channels, and I would start leaving comments and saying, "Hey, I have a similar video on my, you can come check out my channel." So there are ways that you can engage with other maybe platforms, groups, Facebook pages, influencers who have similar types of content. And that's a really good way to start immersing yourself in the community, because once you're immersed in that community, you're going to find better ways of connecting with other people who are going to like your content, and you're going to start seeing what's working.
And before we get off of this, we only have 2 more minutes, but I have to do the 30 seconds on there. Rebecca, who was supposed to be sitting here, this is her, from Vindabono Productions, which is America's Funniest Home Videos, right? They spent 30 years trying to monetize the same type of content, right? Clips and those kinds of things. Literally, she told me she was going to be late because they were doing a deal that involved animals.
Yeah.
And animals on social, and it's a deal with one of the parties that we've been talking about, and so and that's a great. They wouldn't be moving from TV and expanding to these other areas if it weren't very monetization wise, very fruitful for them.
Yeah, everyone loves a funny cat video.
Oh yeah.
It's worked for 15 years. I think it still works.
Yes. All right. So.
Yeah. Real quick, Jen's point about collaboration is so paramount, right? Influence begets influence. We've seen that time and time again. That's been proven out on digital platforms. And it comes back to the earlier question about, how do you effectively optimize and get reach for your content? Content is king, but distribution is God. So the ways you can do that are paid media, as John talked about, doing organic optimization through search, and thinking about your own audience, right? How are you growing your subscriber activity and encouraging them to come back and watch your content over and over again?
That's great. All right, this is the last question, but this one has to be hot. If it's not good, we're going to just yank it. Anybody? One last question?
It's pressure.
All right. Then it's gonna be for you guys. This is your rapid fire. This is like, George, no essays, not me either. One company, can't be your own, that we should be looking at in the marketplace. You don't need to explain, just give us a company that we should be looking at, or that organization that will help us move forward.
Nintendo.
Nintendo.
Yeah.
Don't explain, look at Nintendo. Maybe after, question him.
The content creators behind Skam, the Norwegian teen ensemble drama that is multi-platform, and its fourth season just finished and created a massive sensation. I forget what they're called, something, but Skam, S-K-A-M, really cool show.
It's for our digital audience.
Yeah, the guys who made that. Julie Andon, that's her name.
Toonstar is a mobile app that lets you live stream as a cartoon character. They're making a big launch this Thursday, which is going to be fun. So check that out. It's called Toonstar, mobile app for live streaming as a cartoon character.
We're making you guys some money. All right, James or John.
Love it.
Well, just anything in, I think, VR and AR is what we need to think about. There are a lot of companies with that, obviously, but I think that space to me is super interesting, and I think it's early and we sort of think of what it is, but I think fast forward to 10 years, I think we're going to need to be really focusing on that. So
there's a VR panel next, by the way.
So
but that's
immersive technology, immersive experiences, I think is going to be incredibly interesting and something to watch. So.
All right, Jennifer, close it right.
My colleagues will probably hate me for saying this. We're kind of obsessed, but we shouldn't be, but we are. Team 10. If you don't know who they are, right? If you don't know who they are, you should just be in the know because they're the cool kids in town right now. Everyone's talking about them.
Who knows Team 10? Just quick. Team 10?
Just do a
Two
Google
people.
search.
All right, there you
Just
go.
good to know about.
Making your money. All right, look, you guys have been a great audience. Panelists, you've been fantastic. Guys, network, come up and get their cards and talk to them. Thank you guys very much.